Welcome to the Counter Narrative Podcast, a show designed to change the way we talk and think about education. By sharing stories of successes and triumphs, we aim to challenge the dominant narrative that often negatively portrays our disenfranchised populations. I'm your host, Charles Williams, an urban educator for more than 15 years, a current school principal in Chicago, an educational consultant, an equity advocate, and the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of the Counter Narrative Podcast. Thank you for still coming back after all this time. We are well into season 6. Now, I'll be honest, when I started doing these, I had no idea how to do seasons. So my seasons, we haven't been around for 6 years. It's 3 seasons. It's like, at school, we've got our fall, we've got our spring, we've got our summer. So this is season 6, excited. Because we are continuing to reach out and to connect with individuals that are not in my normal circle, but I am branching out and connecting through people. So very excited. Today we have Rick joining us, Rick Holmes, for Relate Then Educate. I met Rick through Katie. That's how I first started hearing about him. Then we connected. Rick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm just glad to be here. Glad to be talking to you. Yeah, Katie Kinder, shout out to her. She's amazing. And I was able to actually meet her and get to talk with her. Aaron and I actually had dinner with her a few weeks ago. And you talk about connecting quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like her story paired with my story and our hearts, are headed in the same direction. And it was great. And she had talked about you. She said that you were the principal that teachers always want. She had a lot of great things to say about you, nice. High praise, and I just am so glad to be here talking to you.
Well, thank you. And for those of you listening, Katie Kinder, she has been on the show twice now. I should have written down some notes here so I could tell you what episode, but go back, you could find her. An amazing individual. So happy that we have crossed paths. But Katie, as much as I love you, we're not here to talk about you. We're here to talk with Rick. So Rick, tell us a little bit about who you are, what kind of your pathway, and then my favorite part, maybe something interesting about you that most people don't know.
Oh, wow. Well, my history is this. I was born and raised into a family of educators. My mom and dad put in 80 years combined in primarily public school. And so I grew up understanding the reverence behind education and the importance of that. And then I also got to hear a lot of the nuance in, relationships with kids, with other teachers, with administrators and all that. So fast forward, I go to college and got my degree, began my educational career. And I taught and coached for 20 years. I taught in large schools, small schools, urban and rural, private and public. So I got a taste of a lot of different venues for education. And, it's that teaching and education is just deeply seated in my heart. And about 3 years ago, I made a change in my life, in my career, and I left education, but my heart never left. And of course, pandemic hit, and I watched my wife. She's an elementary school counselor, and watched what she was going through. And I was connecting with a lot of my friends that were still teaching, and my heart, it hurt for them. And I heard a lot about what was going on in education, but it seemed like a lot of those stories weren't coming from teachers. And so I started a project called Relate Then Educate, and it's grown quite a bit over the last few months. But we want to allow teachers to share their stories, share their wisdom. We do that in a lot of different ways. Really, any way that we can find, we pursue that. So, that's kind of my path and where it's been. As far as what people may not know about me, I would say about 10 years ago, I was prompted, and it's a whole other story, but I was prompted to begin to take some risks, and both within my career in the classroom, things like that, trying new things, but also in my personal life. And so I had a conversation with my daughter. I was putting her to bed one night, and as parents do, they try to instill some wisdom at times. And so in our conversation, I was talking to her about, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to accomplish? And, you need to take just one step toward that and then take another step. And so we talked about what it is that she wanted to do. And then she said, well, Dad, what do you want to do? And I said, well, kiddo, I always wanted to be, in a commercial or in a movie. And she said, well, Dad, you need to take that first step, and then you need to take another step. And I
Nice.
said, hey,
Nice.
I hear you. I hear you. And so I told her, I said, by the end of the summer, I'm going to have been in something. And turns out I did a little fishing and got a part in a movie. It was an indie film out of Oklahoma City. And I ended up doing a few movies and some commercials and stuff. But it was just fun. It wasn't like I was delving into that to feed my family, but it was just something that sparked in me a creative opportunity, and it fed me a lot of energy, and a lot of that went right back into my classroom. So, that I don't tell a lot of people about that because I don't think it's I don't think it's worth talking about, really. But you asked, so I told you.
Yeah, hey, I love it. It's Rick, the educator, the entertainer. I like this. I like this.
Of course.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I'm only assuming because I know I will. Right? People are going to be like, "Ooh, we're going to Google Rick on IMDb, see if we can find him."
Oh my goodness. They won't find
You're
much.
like, no, no. That's awesome, and it's interesting. That it's I always find it interesting. My wife and I, we have 5 daughters, and when we try to be the parent, we're instilling advice and wisdom, and in that moment that they turn it around on you, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, wait a minute, like I'm so used to giving out advice and wisdom, I'm
Yes.
not always practiced, right, with living
Yeah.
that as well. So I'm glad that your
And
daughter.
it's to me, those moments are so exciting because and what when people ask me about, what it is that I'm doing, things like that, and they're curious about it, I'm like, there's something in everyone that we want to do, but if we don't pay attention to that, or we just push that part of us to the side, then it goes dormant. And that thing that is kind of calling out to each one of us, deep in our heart, that it maybe we were a kid when we first came across it, but it's something that we just always have wanted to do. That is where the life is. It's where the energy is. And if you're tired and if you're burned out, um, tap into that place in your heart because it will feed you. It's just that people tend not to pay attention to that because it may be frivolous, or it may be a bit absurd for an adult to want to do. You've never gone to Disney World, but you wanted to go to Disney World. Well, try it. Try it and see what that does to your heart, because it can lead to other things. Like if I can do this, what else could I do? And that just begins to feed you as an individual, you as a person. And then, as a benefit to that, you are able to give that energy away to your students or your children or your wife or your husband. Um, it's a positive feedback loop that I want to draw people's attention to, because it is fun, you know.
Absolutely, and it's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about, because just as I said, a lot of times I think, and as an administrator, I think a lot of times we're very practiced into saying, hey, teachers do this, do this, do this. And as teachers, then they're doing that with their own students. But as you
Mm-hmm.
said earlier, a lot of times what happens in the mix of that is that the teachers' voices get lost, right? We don't hear back from them as much as maybe we should. And so I'm
Mm.
curious, in the months that you've been doing this, and even leading up to you doing this work, what are some of the things that you have learned about as teachers start to open up and to share their own stories, the power behind that?
Oh my goodness. It's, I grew up around teachers. I worked with teachers, but when I began to sit down with multiple teachers and just talking about them and their experiences, and the things that they love and the things that frustrate them and things like that, we would eventually get back around to, like, why they got into education. And more often than you would think, these stories are extraordinary, and they inform why this person is a great teacher. It's because we have a book coming out in late this year, and the stories in it speak to this. But it for reference point, it is the kid that was in second grade that had a really rough family life, and maybe struggled in reading and things like that, and they had a teacher, and the teacher just connected with them on a human level, right? And they learned to read, and they began to grow, and they began to see the world as a fruitful place, and a place where they had a seat at the table, and they could accomplish things. And so that person grows up, goes to college, and then teaches second grade, and is giving that back, right? And you would think, well, that's a great story, but that's not the norm. No, it happens all the time, all the time. It's not unique. It's not a unicorn. It is a rhythm of if you begin to talk to teachers a lot, you begin to hear that rhythm of I want to be like Mrs. So and so that helped me so much, right? Um, you see just how much teachers love their kids, and how much they're willing to give and not get back. And it really it feeds me energy to the extreme, but it also breaks my heart at the same time, because the teachers that I talk to will talk about all of these extraordinary things. They will drop wisdom like it's just that, just like, yeah, of course I do that every day. And it's like, no, no, no. What you did there in that moment was extraordinary, and it was complex, and normal people can't do that kind of thing, because they just don't have the social emotional IQ that it takes to be able to do that. But then in the same breath, they will discard all of their experiences and wisdom and brush it away, and say things like, I'm just a teacher. I'm just a teacher. And so what I began to see and began to, like, in my heart, want to do is to reflect accurately back to them how special they are, and how extraordinarily equipped they are, and how just wonderful their hearts are, and what they're doing, right? Not in a euphemistic way, not to patronize them, but to say, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, normal people can't operate in the world the way that you do. You are special. And then what comes with that, which is a kind of a difficult message to carry out, is if the environment that you're in is not making you feel as special as you actually are, then maybe you need to, move to a different place that will love you and protect you, and feed back to you the energy that you're giving out. Um, that is a difficult tightrope to walk, because I don't want teachers to leave education. I want them to stay, but not at their detriment, and not at them sacrificing themselves. And then that's really what Relate Then Educate is all about. Let's start with you first. Let's make you uh, healthy and strong, and creative, and loving the fact that you of what you do, and who you are, and that will then magnify what it is that you do in the classroom.
So,
Right.
Rick, you said a lot of powerful things here, right? The and I want to start off with this. The purpose of this podcast initially was just designed to challenge those dominant narratives out there. And I love
Yeah.
the fact that you talked about just a teacher, because you're right. In society, there are so many people that have these negative ideas of what a teacher is, or it's just, well, you're just a teacher, right? You show up at 8, you get to leave at 3, you get summers off, like
Right.
all of these things. And you get to, you play with your kids all day and you send them home. And it's like, you have no clue. But I think what happens a lot, and we've talked about on this show, is that we hear these narratives and we begin to internalize them. So as
Yes.
educators, we echo that same sentiment. And you're right, we start to develop this idea of who we are. And so going back to what you said earlier, I have this passion that I want to pursue, but that doesn't connect to this. And I think
Right.
that we as administrators, as we talk about, we kind of talked about before the show, when we view that and we do our PDs and we connect with teachers, there's a lot of how, right? And I think, to be honest, I've been reflecting since our last conversation. When I continue to connect with you and all I'm telling you is this is how you should do your job, this is how you should do your job, what I'm saying is you're incompetent, right? You don't have the capacity. But what if I said, no, you have the capacity, you have the drive, you have the passion. Let's reconnect with that. As you mentioned earlier, your why. Let's talk about your why. There's a reason why you're here, and let that fuel you, right? I understand sometimes we need some direction, but that
Hmm.
passion and that drive behind it is going to get you a lot farther than me sitting down and saying, well, here's a series of PD on, I don't know, higher order questioning. Like, because if you
Yeah.
don't care, it doesn't matter. No matter how good the PD is, if that fire is gone, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, there is a measure of, and my heart is for the young teachers, the teachers from 0 to 5, because there are statistics. 43% get out because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. And to me, that is a heart issue, not an intellectual. It's not frontal lobe. It's not a puzzle to fix. It is, my heart was not strong enough to endure the first few years of challenging skill set building, and I want to reframe that, because the fact that teachers need to learn how to teach is real, and but it's not a forever thing. So, for instance, when you come into the classroom, you need some basic, kind of foundational things. And a friend of mine, Joe Lane, who is a teacher coach here in Oklahoma, she talks about, you need to be able to give instruction concisely. You need to give instruction from the front of the room and make sure that your kids understand that this is a moment for, I'm giving you instruction on how to do this particular thing. And then you delve into the it's kind of the details of that per child. But knowing your kids' names in the first few days, how can a seating chart affect you positively or negatively depending on your teaching style? These really basic things can help you kind of set up a framework to then build this really dynamic and really difficult skill set that you need to be able to run a classroom of, say, 30 kids. And if you're in middle school, it's 30 kids every hour. That is not something someone can just walk in off the street and do, and it takes 3, 4, 5 years to learn it. But when you have that skill set, then you can begin to like play with it. What do I want to do with my classroom? But if you don't have any juice to do that after 4 or 5 years, you're not coming back. You're going to go do something else. And I want to draw attention to that skill set because it's so valuable in the marketplace. Teachers, once I began to, I left education, I got into business. I began to hear this note of, hey, no one talks about it, but teachers are the best people to pick up because they show up, they're on time, they will work really hard for not a lot of money. They're great with people. They do everything that they need to do. They're detail people. And I'm like, wait a minute. teachers don't feel valuable. Like myself, I would say I'm just a teacher by default. That's what I would say. And I'm like, wow, no, we teachers are a valuable commodity in the marketplace that nobody talks about. Um, but it's because of that skill set. So, but I think I got off onto it, kind of a rabbit trail. But
Sorry.
the premise is you have to feed the heart. Otherwise, the other won't have a venue. You won't be in the classroom, 4 or 5. Well, used to teachers would teach for 20, 30 years. That was kind of the norm. Not anymore. Not anymore. And I want to keep teachers there. I want them to be fulfilled in what they do, feel valuable about what they do, and feel good about themselves. And stop saying things like, I'm just a teacher. Like, no, I'm a teacher and I'm incredible. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's what I want.
Live that, right? And claim it. So
Yeah.
I'm curious. So we're talking a lot about this, and I think what we're saying isn't new. We've said this many times in many ways, and yet here we are still having the conversation because it's still the reality.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this podcast right now and saying, Rick, I agree with you, maybe they're a teacher, maybe they're an administrator. So I want to tackle this from two different angles. As an educator, as a teacher, what are some things that I can do to kind of step outside of that instead of just defaulting to, I'm just a teacher? What are some things that I can do when I go back into work this week that I can do so that way I can live my truth as being an amazing educator? And then on
Mhm.
the other side, to say as an administrator, what can I do to support my teachers to build an environment where they don't feel like they're just teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. So practical next steps. Um, as a teacher, here's what I would say. I would say number one, when you go back to school, you need to begin to be aware of your environment and begin to shape your environment so that you are protected as a person and a human being. And we talk about when we do professional development about self-care, we talk about, first of all, being aware of how you feel, checking in with yourself, because you can go through a day, and have a really difficult day in the classroom, and then the bell rings and you're doing work for the next couple of hours, and then you get in your car and then you eat, and you never stop to really look at, like, how am I doing? And so that alone can really raise some red flags. Like, if you're ending school, say at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you take 2 minutes to sit at your desk and, shut the door, lock the door, turn out the light, and just sit with yourself for a couple of minutes, and you feel your hands are shaking or your chest is hot, because you're so angry, frustrated. Maybe you've got a fear response or a panic disorder. Like there are a lot of things that they go unnoticed, but we want to draw attention to this. And then once you can see it and recognize where you're at, honestly, then take steps to, here are some practical steps that we talk about. Maybe you need to change the environment of your classroom, like turning off the overhead lights and bringing in a few lamps. A lot of people have smart boards, and there are channels where you can pull up on the smart board a fireplace or a beach scene. And what we have heard from various teachers is that when they begin to shape their classroom as their environment and own it, their kids feel more comfortable in that environment, right? Um, and then starting when you begin to shape your environment toward health and healthy living for you as an individual, that means being comfortable in your environment, but then also having really healthy boundaries for yourself. One of the common things that we've heard a lot in the last 2 years is, I don't work past my contracted hours anymore. And, for me, when I first heard that, I was like, what? Like, it's the norm to stay.
Right.
But when the pandemic hit, teachers recognized, I can't, if I want to do this for more than a couple of years, I'm going to have to set good boundaries. And that means I have to leave at 4. And that also means that I have to leave work at work. So don't bring papers home. When we bring that up in professional development, we get some chuckles. But here's the thing. When you begin to set your boundaries, I start work at say 7:30, whatever it is, and then I end it at 4, and that's my school time. What do you then do? You then open up an opportunity for you as a person, as an individual, to discover what it is that you want to do. Do you love to read? Then go read instead of grading papers, right? What could that do in the long term? Feeding yourself. Do you like movies? Do you like to cook? Do you want to do a side hustle? Do you want to make bracelets? Whatever it is, that can feed you. And then you can once you're fed, you can then give more to your kids, but in a healthy way. Boundaries, right? One other thing that I would like to note in that is that veteran teachers, I know without even meeting the people that listen to this podcast, but I know the veteran teachers out there and veteran educators in their first few years likely had a tremendous amount of frustration, and they just had a difficult time, and they likely had no one to say, hey, you're not alone. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be rough for a while. It's not going to be what you thought, but it's going to be really, really good. If you needed, as a veteran teacher, if you needed somebody to say something to you positive and uplifting when you were in first, second, third, fourth year of your teaching career, then be that for somebody else, because there is somebody in your building that you could probably see in their face, I know where you're at. Go to them and say, listen, you're not alone. I'm not trying to fix your problems. I'm just saying, if you need something, let me know. That is powerful, because teachers tend to silo themselves off because there is an environment of scarcity in schools, right? But begin to give to your fellow educators when you know where they are because you were there. And then, as an administrator, like we talked about, I would emphasize, especially in the next 12 to 18 months, the why and not the how. Professional development that is talking about how teachers can do better, do more, learn to be this or whatever, that is hitting a brick wall at the moment. Teachers are so tired. They're so tired, and they have no capacity to do any more than they are doing because they're doing so much. And just feed their heart. And, I think that alone, when we talk to administrators that want to bring us in, they are connected with their teachers. They know their teachers are in a place that they're running on fumes, and they need some love, and they need somebody to tell them, you're not alone. And that just identifying the fact that, hey, we're in a unique position, and we want to accommodate that, says a lot to teachers, because a lot of people do not recognize where a teacher is at. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was pretty long-winded. I apologize.
Hey, no, that's great. And I'm hoping that whoever's listening or watching right now, that you have your notebook out and that you're writing these things down, because they're simple and yet they're impactful and powerful, right? Understanding where you're at, whether it's, as you mentioned, right, whether I'm journaling at the end of the day, whether I'm just kind of doing a mindfulness check. My co-host from my other show, Michael McWilliams, he has a huge chart, in elementary where they do like the clips, or like you're behaving it's a similar concept, but instead it's an emotional one. Like, where am I at today? Yeah. Right. And teachers can move that clip around. And so being cognizant, of where you're at, definitely. I love the idea of pushing back against toxic positivity. Yes. You're right. Like any other field, like my daughter, my second to youngest daughter, was just at her first job at Forever 21. And she would tell me about how, she was supposed to be out by this time, but they were having her work till this time. They were having her punch out, but she was still working. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, if they have you punch out, you walk out of that store. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, but we've normalized that culture within education, and not only have we normalized it,
Yeah.
we've built structures and expectations around it to where it's like, yeah, no, you get your one prep hour per day, which is maybe because sometimes I might need you to skip that prep to go do that, but still I need your papers graded.
Mm-hmm.
like like we need to definitely come back to normalizing, and not just teachers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this to my fellow administrators and beyond me. We need to normalize that and
Yeah.
rethink how we're doing education, so that way my teachers can walk out at 3. Well, for us it's 4, but they can walk out and they're done. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it, and then come back to work the next morning and do it all over again, and be refueled, be re-energized. So, Rick, it was a long response, but I think they're great. They're great, and so I want to
Good.
say thank you for sharing those.
Good.
Um, so as we begin to wrap up here, because I'm sure that people are like, wait a minute, I love what this guy is saying. We are connecting. You talked a little bit about Relate Then Educate. How can they find you? How can they connect with the company? Whether they just want to connect and see some of the amazing work you're doing, or even bring you in to connect with their teachers and staff. How could they reach you?
Our hub is relatetheneducate.com. It's our website. It's got a little bit of everything on there. And so, if you're interested in hearing from teachers, we have videos of teachers, talking about specific things, but whether it be mental health or their first few years. We've got a first year teacher journal running. So one of my former players and students, she started her first job in Missouri this year, and so she agreed to about once a month just, hey, send check-ins like this is happening, this is what I'm struggling with, so that people can like say, hey, yeah, okay, so I'm not the only one going through that. If you are interested in having us at your school, we would love to come. We travel. Our heart is for teachers, and we want to get in front of teachers and talk to teachers. And that you can find us on the speaker page, and you can see, kind of what we talk about, and then contact us from there. We mentioned Katie Kinder. We brought her in, and she is on there as well. She speaks, directly to those younger teachers as well. We have a podcast that we just started. We want to use video. We want to use audio. We want to use any media that we can to get teachers' voices out there. And then obviously we have the book coming out later this year that we're very excited about. So yeah, relatetheneducate.com. You can find a lot of our information there. And then follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. We're out there. We're engaged, and drop us a line any way that you want to.
Wonderful. Well, Rick, I want to say thank you, for not just coming on the show and connecting. I was familiar with the work that you're doing, but now I feel like I know so much more and am deeply connected. So I thank you for that. But just thank you. Thank you for doing this work. I think that teachers need to hear this. I think teachers need to be reminded of their importance and to stand tall and firm in who they are, but also for administrators. I think we need to hear this and be reminded that we need to take care of our people. I know that is something I pride myself in. I talk about it all the time, but as general, we as administrators get so caught up in all the things we need to do, and they become tasks.
Yeah.
And then we look at our teachers as getting these tasks done. And sometimes we forget they're people and they need things as well. And so thank you for that. So administrators, if you're listening today, just take a moment and make sure that you're connecting with the people who are in your building, because they're the ones who make everything run. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Rick, thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate what you're doing to bring in voices that are changing the narrative of education, which I think is important. And so thank you for the work that you do.
No problem, Rick. And I look forward to connecting with you. And I might have to pick up a few of those first-year teacher journals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it.
All right.
All right.
Well, you take care, and I'll see you soon.
Okay. Sounds good.